Morning. Good morning. Oh, yeah. Another fantastic day to be alive, right? Hope you're taking an awesome deep breath and feel excited to be alive. Oh, all of you, thanks for being here and thanks for watching. I know a bunch of you are going to be watching this recording. You couldn't make it this morning, but we are going to talk about influence because influence is everything in life.
And in parenting.
And in parenting especially, but in marriage as well. And in like even the littlest thing. So most of us
Your
don't.
in-laws.
And well, and your own parents and like your neighbors, your church congregation, the teams or organization, the classes. I know many of you are out teaching classes for your kids or your kids' peers, and you're coaching groups. You're doing homeschool groups, you're coaching your kids sports teams or whatever, you're teaching music lessons, or you're leading a debate team. Like influence is everything. The challenge is most of us don't give it enough thought. We don't think about it enough and we downplay it. And I know for me, especially before I really understood this principle, I just kind of figured some people have it, some people don't. It was the haves or the have-nots. And I was just like, I guess I'm a have-not. Those lucky people that get an influence. Like I remember specifically acknowledging and admiring that when somebody spoke or asked somebody to do something, like people responded. I remember just being in awe, like, whoa, how do they do that? Like they say something and people respond or do it. And now I've learned it's the skill of influence. And here's the greatest news ever, is that it's learnable. It is a learnable skill. Influence is a skill that you can develop. And I want to like emphasize today, I think we have to, you guys. We have to take our level of influence seriously. And so today we're going to go over some tools and strategies to do that.
We have to, especially bring it back to marriage and parenting. I think in order to be effective and have effective relationships and meaningful relationships, you have to have influence, because life and marriage and parenting are essentially these laboratories for personal growth and development. And as a part of that laboratory, you're going to face uncomfortable things, difficult things, stressful things. And the way to best handle that is to increase your own level of influence, so that if you have a vision or a goal or a dream or even something about yourself that you want to communicate to other people, if you need help and support and love and encouragement, you have to be able to communicate and articulate that to other people, your spouse, your children, so that they can help you and support you, so that they can join in your mission and your goal and your vision. Like all of that requires you to have influence.
Wow. And if you really kind of spend time thinking through it and really conceptualizing it, a lack of influence is at the core of so many of our problems in marriage, parenting, and society. And here's a way to tease this out. I love asking myself and asking my clients. And so I invite you to ask yourself, take a situation and say, would this be different if I were 5 times more influential?
Well, even in the simple daily things, because I recently received an email with some questions, and it was like, I'm trying to focus on my goals. I'm trying to be productive. I'm trying to make progress on, earning more income for my family. This person's working from home, but my spouse keeps coming to me and asking me to do all these trivial errands or these trivial things. And I want to love and respect and honor them, but it's interrupting my productivity. And so they're like, what do I do? Like, I don't know what to do in this situation. And part of that does come down to a lack of influence. If you're not able to influence, which includes communicate and articulate what it is you're trying to do in a way that they can understand it and then want to support you, that's going to be a very difficult situation to work out, because it's not just a matter of communicating, it's a matter of influencing. And again, when we're talking about influence, we're not talking about manipulating or brainwashing or any of the negative connotations. We're talking about being able to powerfully inspire and enlighten people as to where you are, what you think, what you believe, and what you're trying to achieve. And in the process, also understanding others and where, same thing, where they are and what they're trying to achieve, so you can work together in harmony.
And I love that question that came in. That's super awesome, because that's an interesting dynamic of influence. Is there are requests coming at her, and so influence plays both ways, right? If she were asking others to do things, there's influence. That's kind of the obvious one. It's like, when I ask people to do things, I want to be able to influence them. That's obvious, right? But the other side of that is powerful too, is like requests coming at you, your level of influence affects that dynamic as well. And so it really comes,
because if you just say no without influence,
right,
then the spouse can take that as, well, you don't care, or you don't support me, or you don't know what I'm trying to do and what I'm going to accomplish. Now, the answer might be that there's some give and take from both of them.
And that requires influence.
And that requires influence. But so having influence allows you and makes it possible for you to say no, but in a way that your spouse doesn't feel resentful.
Yep, absolutely. So as I see it, I think, well, yes, right? So, okay, there's a comment coming in here. Sounds like a little bit of misalignment of expectations. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that plays in massively to influence, a lack of influence, or how influence plays out in life. And that's going to go, I mean, all around with kids, spouses, community, etc. Like,
work.
It's getting that clear. And I think as I'm thinking through this kind of out loud, I think there are at least two major elements to influence. Number one, at its absolute core, is who you are. Like your way of being, your characteristics, your attributes, your attitude, your personality, all of that. Who you are as a being is the core and most important part of influence. And then the second piece is how you communicate. And that's not just talking, although it's a major part of it, but it's how you carry your body, and like your mannerisms, your gestures, your expressions, your voice, your tone, your clothes, the way you walk, the way you stand, all of your body language. Like there's every bit of it is communication.
Well,
and that affects influence.
And I want to add here, because not only is communication what you put out, but it's also what you're receiving and how you're receiving it. Yep. So, for example, I was listening to this audio program and they were talking about the ability to sit with discomfort. And especially when you're talking to your spouse or you're talking to your children and you're trying to influence them. And if they're saying things that make you uncomfortable or make you anxious or upset, like, part of being able to influence means being able to handle that and manage it. And the word they were using was being able to self-soothe.
Nice.
Do you remember this program?
No.
It's from Secrets of a Passionate Marriage is what it's called.
Oh, okay.
And he's talking about your ability to self-soothe yourself helps you. He wasn't specifically talking about influence, but helps you to influence, because when you get flustered or upset or uncomfortable with what's being talked about, and you're like, oh, this is uncomfortable, you have to kind of keep yourself calm so you don't overreact and you don't respond in how do you say that? That's not a word. I'm making up an influential way, a non-influential way.
Right.
Right?
Well, what's happening physiologically is you're being triggered, so to speak, into survival brain. And the survival brain goes into fight or flight or freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's ever uncomfortable or frustrating, or it might feel painful, or you might feel threatened, you go into
Vulnerable.
survival brain. And so then you're going to fight with your spouse or your kids, or you're going to take off. They said something and you're going to go slam doors and go cry somewhere and get angry, or go throw and break things, or like whatever,
freeze
or
and just sit there
go
and
numb.
be like, okay, yeah.
And you just check out, but inside you're,
Or you can become very complacent or
Yep.
Conforming.
Yep. It's like,
but
fine, I don't care.
You end up being resentful when you do that.
Yep. So an excellent point. You have to be able to be aware of the survival brain, and just kind of sit with it and keep cool, take some deep breaths. Literally, like getting oxygen to your brain helps the brain kind of come back to life, instead of like
come back to cognitive.
Yeah, because like survival at all costs, like run away or fight back. And you're like, no, we're having a conversation. I don't like this conversation, but we're having a conversation. I can sit with this and stay in the game. So if it's okay, I'd like to zoom way out for a second and get a big view of influence. I came across this quote from a very well-known writer named David Brooks, and he's talking about huge change. And so I want to zoom way out to like talk about influence in the world at large, and the influence you have in the world. I know we're all about family, and I think the greatest influence in the world is the influence we have in our families. But I also think some of us, not all, some of us have a moral obligation to have influence in the world. You have a song to sing, so to speak. You have a message. I don't know. I don't think we can escape the responsibility that some of us have to have an influence for good in the world.
Well, and in the world, we mean
your world.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be like, you're a politician or some global leader. You can make, well, okay. But ultimately the same principles apply to impacting your world, which could be your neighborhood, your community, your church, your
group, extended
family,
your cause. Co-op. Yeah. Like a nonprofit you believe in, whatever it is. Okay, here we go. But he's like, I really want to emphasize here what will lead to change. He says, it's not politicians who lead this kind of change. Instead, it is moral activists and cultural pioneers. Those are really fascinating words he's using. Moral activists and cultural pioneers. Those who shape the manners and the mores, like you're founded in a Moor, right, are the true legislators of mankind. They wield the greatest power and influence. Ooh, right? It's not a politician. It's somebody who stands for something. And then it usually starts with a subculture. A small group of creative individuals finds the current moral ecology oppressive and alienating, right? So it's a small group of people who look out and say, hey, things seem to be off. And I can't think of a better time for this to be applicable than right now. We're all looking out. We got front row seats to things being like, this is
interesting.
Off. Something's interesting here. So a small group of creative people, they see it oppressive or alienating. So they go back in history and they update an old moral ecology that seems to provide a better way to live. They create a lifestyle that others find attractive. We're going to talk about that because that is so important. If you're going to be influential, your life and your results must be attractive. Ooh, we'll come back to that. If you can create a social movement that people want to join, they will bend their energies and ideas to you. Oh. So on the big scale, if we're going to have an impact, it's because of the way we live and our overall way of being.
Well, I don't even know where this thought or quote came from, but I know it's something that I've been saying to my daughter lately, and she's been saying to me, which maybe, I don't know, you probably know where it came from, but it's essentially never take advice from someone whom you would not like to exchange lives with. You know where that came from?
I don't, but I say it all the time too.
And we've been saying it to her, and she's been saying it to us. And so, in fact, she kind of uses it as a guide for who she listens to, because she looks at people and she's like, well, you're telling me to do this thing, but I look at the results in your life. No, that's not what I want to follow. And so I think, like you were mentioning, this ties perfectly in with influence, even with influence with your children, especially with influence with your children. It's because if your kids look at you and think, you know what, I don't know that I would really want your life as an adult, right? That weakens your ability to influence them, especially not so much when they're young, because children, when they're young, are still learning about the world. But as they get older and as they become teens and young adults, if they can start looking around, because that's what they do, that's the natural evolution of things, they start looking around into society, and now they're gauging what they see against what they see at home. And if they start to see that what is out in the world is more appealing than what they see at home, you begin to lose your influence with them.
Boom. Okay. So I want to ask a couple questions. So those of you watching the recording, I hope you'll take some notes and really be thoughtful about this. Those of you who are here with us, I'd love to hear some responses. What area of your life would you like to have more influence? We'll start there.
With children, with spouse, with community, with work, with
you just
whatever.
Pick. In what area of your life would you like to have more influence? And I've gotten every kind of conceivable answer when I've asked people this question. Okay, education, how so? Expound a little bit on that. And what else? You think it might be a particular person you're hoping to influence right now that maybe you feel like needs it, or it might be a situation you want to influence. It might be an outcome you want to influence. Like you can have more influence in your finances, for example, or more influence in your income, or a work relationship, or, well, in every aspect of life. It's interesting when you take this approach to it, like, how can I influence this thing? Which I love this idea, this whole concept of how you take something, even inanimate things or concepts or topics, and say, how can I influence this? How can I move this in a direction it needs to go? I read a quote this morning that just struck me so powerfully. It was by G.H. Wells. And he said, society and civilization is in a race between education and catastrophe. Like, wow, man, do we need to make sure that education is happening, ironically, in the midst of all the information that's out there, and all the education that's readily available at literally the click of a button. And yet, in some ways, education is grossly lacking. Okay, so here she's expanding. Amy says, for my children, I want to have more influence for education for my children, but also for education as a whole, in the sense of disrupting education by taking a non-traditional approach. Man, yeah. Somebody else I know has that same passion and fire.
Yes. Yep, exactly.
And what a cool, noble cause, right? To influence an educational system, a philosophy, a dynamic, to really get in a disruptive way and say, let's do this in a better way. Which that's really what I just read that quote from, right? It's like it's a small group of people who step back and look at something and say it's off. So we look at the educational, it's like, this isn't working, and so we recreate it, or go back and find what used to work and push that into play. Okay, here's another one. Mary says, I'd like to have more influence with prospective clients that I meet. Oh yeah, right? If you're running a business, especially as entrepreneur in sales or marketing, like isn't isn't marketing and sales, isn't that just influence?
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. So you're like, if I want to do better sales or better business or growing my business, scaling my business, and we are included in this, absolute must, non-negotiable, have to become more influential. I love this. Stephanie said, I want more influence with my teenagers, connecting with and inspiring them to reach higher. And teens are at that, Rachel alluded to it, teens are at that perfect spot in life where they're doing self-discovery and outside discovery. Really, for the first time, they start looking around and they become cognizant of the world. It's so funny. I love that stage because they start noticing things you've been telling them all along, and they're like, hey, what about this? And you're like, welcome to awareness and consciousness. Like, we're glad you're here. We've been talking about this for a long time. But that's what happens in their brain. Their brain just comes into consciousness and they start noticing, and they're like, hey, well, that neighbor does this, and my friend does this, and that does that. And hey, why do we do this? And if we are going to keep, maintain, or grow an influence with teens and young adults, especially then when they move out into the world, we have to be leveling up and living in a way, being a person that is respectable. We have to maintain a level of respect. Like we talked about that on our podcast yesterday.
Yes, which I'm publishing today. But I think along with this idea of being respectable and respecting, that means that you have to respect them in that when they start asking questions, and I think especially with teenagers, I mean, it can start sooner than that and it works, but when teenagers start asking these questions, when they come to you wondering, hey, why do we do things this way? You need to be ready for real answers. You need to have thought that through. You need to know why you do the things you do. And it's not just because your parents did it or your church does it or your whoever says you should do it.
Or you're the boss and you say so.
Yeah, because you're the boss and you say so. Like, you need to know and have real answers that are respectable answers, meaning the teenagers can hear you talk about it and be like, okay, that makes sense.
And
I get that. I understand that. And I agree with that.
And allow them to expose you a little bit and challenge you a little bit and sit with the vulnerability of be like, hey, well, I disagree with you. Why do you do that?
Yeah.
And be like, great, thank you. Thank you for expressing that, for disagreeing and questioning. Let's talk through it. Right? But most of us get so threatened by that. That, well, I'm going to shut this down. I'm the boss around here. I'm going to outrank you. So you better just do what I say. And they're like,
this is just the way we do things.
That's bogus.
And they, depending on the personality, they may listen.
Right.
But once they reach the age of accountability and they move out or whatever, they're going to start doing their own thing. And often people end up doing the opposite of what their parents did just as a reaction. It didn't jive with them, or as a reaction. Exactly.
Or they never got a good answer.
Right. So they're like, I'm going to figure it out on my own. I'm going to go out there and try it out and experiment and see
if what my parents said or I'm just going to go prove them wrong because I don't like it. Right. We want to avoid that whole situation.
At least with the things that really matter, that are actually destructive. Right.
You want to give them good reason. Man, this stuff is so good. I love all of it. It's just so fun to geek out about. Okay. Oh yeah. So Mary was just singing the same thing with the teens. Love it. And also another one here, with everyone I meet, I want them to leave my presence feeling inspired, encouraged, and more hopeful. Man, Stephanie, that's beautiful. That right there is a noble aim.
Yes, that is a very noble aim, because it takes a lot of work and a lot of personal presence and a lot of personal understanding to be that kind of person everywhere you go. The grocery store, online with Spirit Airlines, customer service.
Because you're like, I don't know who you are, but this is terrible. And these poor sweet little, usually young adults that are answering the phones just on the receiving end of a corporate problem. And I always tell them, whenever I'm talking to someone like that, I always tell them, look, I know it's not your fault. I know you didn't do this personally. I'm not taking this out on you. It has nothing to do with you as an individual. But this is not okay from the business, right? And I always try to be kind with them and consider that, because they receive the brunt. Okay, this is beautiful. And there's lots more. So again, we're circling back. What areas of life do you want to have more influence? So then the question circles back to the two main things. What can you do in your being, who you are? And this is the coolest thing ever. We get to choose who we are. And we can constantly improve and alter our way of being. Personality isn't fixed. It isn't permanent.
There are some natural tendencies, some natural inclinations that you're certainly born with or are nurtured into you. But it is clear that you do have power, especially over a lifetime, to change and influence that.
And
that's scientifically proven.
Yes. And they used to think that the brain was fixed.
At a certain age.
That really learning happened early on, and then after that it was stopped. But now they've realized that the brain maintains plasticity, is what they're calling it, the ability to keep growing and improving and changing all the way up to death. So this whole idea of you can't teach an old dog new tricks, totally false, like scientifically false. You can keep learning. There's neuroplasticity all the way up until you die. So you can keep altering that. And so my question then is, well, the two parts. What do you want to do in your way of being, your results, your life, who you are, to gain more influence in this area? And then the second part is communication. What do you want or need to do in communication? That's the whole communication piece, every bit of it, in order to have more influence in these areas. And so I'd like to talk through this. I have some quotes here, some books, some ideas.
And I know that you've mentioned this before, and I don't know if you're planning on tying it in, but one of the things that you always say is that influence is neither episodic
nor automatic.
Yep. And I don't know if we should talk about that right now or if we're going to talk about that later, but I want to make sure to explain what that is.
Okay. Just hit it right now. We've talked about this before with you guys, but it's worth remembering, because we try to think it's episodic or automatic.
So episodic means something's happening in your marriage or with your kids, your teenagers, they're trying drugs or I don't know, horrible things, whatever is going on. And so you're like, this episode is happening. It's very critical. It's very important. I need to have influence with my child or my spouse because our marriage is going to fall apart if I don't. So an episode is occurring, but just because there's an episode occurring that requires influence doesn't mean you will have influence. Influence is gained before the episode occurs. Now,
it's earned.
Yes.
Right? If you have earned it over time, then in the episode, in the moment, you'll have
influence.
Now, that can be a terrifying thought for some of us. Actually, for all of us. Because if an episode happens and you realize,
I wasn't prepared.
I'm not prepared to influence. I can't influence this. That's a terrifying thought. So better to learn it now than later, of like, hey, wait a minute. We don't know what's on the horizon. We don't know what our teens are going to need, or our toddlers who will become teens. We don't know what they're going to face. Like the contrast, you guys, between the world today and the world in 5 years from now is drastic. So even when our 11-year-old, when he's 16, 5 years from now, he's going to be in a different world than we're in today. That's how fast it's changing. And then our 5-year-old, when she's 15, 10 years from now, I have to be able to influence her with those situations and scenarios, whatever they may be. Right? And I have to earn that. Or like in Stephanie's case, you want to be able to influence and inspire and encourage and give hope to people. You don't know who you're going to meet next week or what their need may be. None of us knows who we might randomly come across next month and what they're going through. But I promise the influence we have is what we are earning.
And so we're going to talk about how to earn it.
Yes. Yeah.
But the other part of that quote I said from Greg Denning is influence is neither episodic nor automatic, meaning that just because you are their parent, or just because I am your spouse, or just because I'm the PTA president, or just because whatever, I'm the president of the United States, does not mean I automatically have influence. So I don't automatically have influence over my children or my teenagers just because I am their mother. And most of us don't realize that at first. We don't realize that we don't have automatic influence just because we're the parent. We have to earn that influence by all the things Greg was talking about: character, behavior, who we are, the way we communicate. And maybe that doesn't seem fair. Like, I gave birth to you, I raised you, I paid all this money to bring you up.
Sleepless nights,
blown
out
broken
diapers.
arms carrying you, like all this stuff I did. And yet that doesn't necessarily mean you have influence with your child just because of that. Because there's other things we can be doing, and often we're doing them unconsciously or with a lack of awareness, that are actually sabotaging our influence. And so even though we have done all of those things, and that does and should deserve a certain level of respect, it doesn't mean it earns that influence, because influence is earned in different ways, which is now what we're
Man,
talking
it's so powerful. So well, in marriage, what you said about marriage struck with me. In a very real way, we have influence with each other in our marriage. And Rachel has a tremendous amount of influence in my life. But kind of play this out in your head. If you lose respect, and it doesn't, it could be in specific things, right? So I could still have respect in this area of my life, but maybe over here I'm kind of dropping the ball.
Well, or Greg could have a lot of respect for me and believe I have a lot of influence in his life, but if I come to him like, "Hon, I'm gonna take the Audi and I'm gonna fix it and do stuff to it and mess around with it," I don't have influence in that. He's not going to let me do that. So that's a specific example of, oh, I have overall influence on a lot of different things, but not over your Audi.
Like, sure, babe, tools are in the garage. Go to town. Go fix whatever needs fixing. So
that's a very specific example. And this is true with your parenting. It's true with your spouse, is that you also have to be aware of, like, okay, maybe I have influence over my teenagers on this thing, but I definitely don't in this or in this or in this. And that's because you may not have the skills for that area of influence. And sometimes that's fine. It's not like we have to have influence over every single thing. Now, if they need to be influenced in a certain area, like fixing a car, they're not going to come to me. They'll go to their dad. You can help find someone that can be an influence over them in that specific area. So sometimes that's what we have to look for, is when we're like, oh, I need more influence, maybe even inspiring them or different things, like, educating them. You might need to find someone who could fulfill that specific role while you focus on the influence that you can have, the things you can have influence over.
And there's a powerful and important principle that can be painful, that when I did this did a YouTube video, and then I did an actual training on it for my Be the Man masterclass. And it was this concept of like, if your spouse doesn't respect you, and if your kids don't respect you, and usually that's because of poor behavior, poor decisions, poor results. Like if you lose respect, you lose influence. It just is. Like if you're making poor decisions, well, here's how I say it. Like if you don't live the message, you suck as the messenger, right? And it's extremely difficult to teach, to influence, to persuade your children or your spouse or other people to live by those principles or truths when the results of your life aren't very exciting or inspiring. In fact, well, I wrote this in my notes a long time ago. If your body or your bank account or your brain or your being or your balance or your marriage or your magic, or whatever it is not in an inspiring state, then why would people want to believe you or do what you say?
Specifically when it comes to that area.
Yes.
Now there's an overall influence that can occur by having those things in alignment. It's like the wheel of life where you have all these different areas. And if some of those things are off, it's kind of like a flat tire. And so it can affect the flow of life. But especially if you have areas of your life that are flat, you're going to have less influence with the other people in your life in that area. Especially that makes sense.
Overall.
And overall.
Because sometimes you'll do that too, right? You're like, well, this person does this, this, and this, but man, I'm not sure they're honest. I don't think they have a lot of integrity. And so the overall influence just slams because you're like, I don't trust them, for example. Is it okay if I read this quote? This is one of my all-time favorite quotes. James Allen here. This is from a book called The Byways of Blessedness. One of my favorite quotes. It's a long quote, so stick with me. That this is just pure gold. Okay. He says, the foolish man thinks that his little faults,
man or woman,
his little indulgences, his little sins are of no consequence. He persuades himself that so long as he does not commit flagrant immoralities, that he's virtuous. In other words, as long as he doesn't do like really bad things, then he's still a good person. And even holy, but he is thereby deprived of virtue and holiness, and I would say influence, and the world knows him accordingly.
His children, spouse.
And everyone around him, yeah. It does not reverence him, adore him, or love him. It actually passes him by. He is reckoned of no account. His influence is destroyed. The efforts of such a man to make the world virtuous,
man or woman,
his exhortations to his fellow men to abandon their great vices, are empty of substance and barren of fruitage. Oh man, this is so good. So basically, because he's not living an exemplary life, his message just is empty. It's just flat and empty.
And fruitage is like results. It's barren of results.
He has no results. So the insignificance which he attaches to his small vices permeates his whole character and is the measure of his manhood. And he is regarded as an insignificant man.
Or woman.
This is so good. Oh, this is so good. Every time I read this quote, I can geek out at more. There's so much depth here. So the levity, meaning the lightness, that he just dismisses it. It's apathy, it's indifference. The levity with which he commits his errors and publishes his weakness comes back to him in the form of the neglect and loss of influence and respect. He is not sought after, for who will seek to be taught of folly? His work does not prosper, for who will lean upon a reed? His words, and this is where it hits home here for all of us. His words fall upon deaf ears, for they are void of practice, wisdom, and experience. And who will go after an echo?
So that being said,
Oh
it
yeah.
is an amazing quote.
Uh-oh.
I honestly love that quote. But I also want, and in fact, this is probably a good time to bring it up and touch on the subject, because we are going to do a podcast on it. And I know that we have this tendency sometimes, especially women, but men sometimes too, of hearing something like this, which is a high ideal,
Yes.
and thinking, oh, I'll never be good enough. Like, what's the point? I can't do that. This is ridiculous.
Right.
You know, and we beat ourselves
Might
up
as well
and
go
we're like,
get a package of Oreos.
right.
And sit
I
down and
might as
binge
well
Netflix.
just binge some Netflix and eat some Oreos. Like, why? I can't do this. It's just too much. It's too high. It's too ideal. And so we want to, and there's we're going to do a podcast about this, because there is a lot of people out there. There's a lot of books. There's a lot of podcasts. There's a lot of coaching out there about, you know what you really have to do is just accept yourself for who you are. And that is true.
Meaning lower your standard and expectations.
Stop trying to shoot for ideals. Stop trying to be
so great
that people, you know, that you can influence people. Stop trying so hard. And that is true, but it's only partly true. It's only half of the truth. I always love to tell myself and tell my kids that all of life is a dichotomy, meaning essentially there's two sides of the coin, the same coin. And one side, and in this dichotomy, they're seemingly contradictory. So on one side of the coin, it is, yes, you need to accept yourself for who you are and where you are.
And love yourself.
And love yourself for who you are and where you are. But the truth is if you always stay there, you will not be happy for the rest of your life.
And in fact, you cannot like yourself
for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You might like yourself when you accept yourself at that moment, because maybe that's a new thing for you. Maybe you've never done that before, and it needs to happen. It needs to occur. You need to feel comfortable in your own skin. But if you then remain there for the rest of your life and never face the discomfort of growth and the discomfort of acknowledging your own weaknesses and your imperfections because you aren't enough, the reality is that's the other side of the coin. You are enough, but you also are not enough. And so you have to have these higher ideals that you're at least striving to become if you want to be truly fulfilled long term.
Yes.
So I just wanted to,
yes,
you know.
Yes. And you're right. It's the best way to describe it, as a dichotomy coin, because they seem contradictory. Accept yourself, don't accept yourself.
Right.
Be content and be totally discontent.
Yeah.
And so chase an ideal.
And it takes some practice to do that.
Yep.
We've had to practice for a lot of years to be totally comfortable with that.
Yep.
Like, we love our life where we are. We accept ourselves for who we are. We know we're great people, but at the same time, it is not enough. And we are not content with where we're at. And where we're going is we're only going to get there by continuing to get better at who we are.
Yep. And that means discomfort and stretching and growth. Okay. So with all that said, I want to ask another question. Let's engage here in some more conversation. What would you like to do or need to do to increase your influence?
In the specific area
it could be specific or general, your choice. What do you need to do or want to do in this context? And again, it includes who you are as a person and how you do communication, like all of it.
Giving or receiving communication.
Yep. What do you need or want to do to be more influential? And again, those of you watching the recording as well, I give this some thought and writing. The answer to this question is the answer to your influence. If I can be so bold and really emphasize this, if you get this right and you do it, you're going to massively transform the level of influence you have.
Do it and keep doing it.
And keep
It's an
doing it, yes,
ongoing
yes.
process. You'll identify something that you're like, gosh, I really am not good at this thing. And so you identify it and you work on it. And then it finally becomes more natural and normal for you. And then you realize, oh, now it's this thing over here. It's an ongoing process. That's life. And that's actually a wonderful thing. I mean, that's something I've learned to love about life and about living, that there's always going to be something else that I get to be working on and improving. And without that, life would lose its meaning. You would literally get bored and be bored to death because there's nothing else to work on or improve.
That is such a beautiful philosophy and paradigm, which I've worked with a lot of coaching clients who that thought is terrifying and overwhelming.
Well,
They're literally like, you mean I have to
do this
climb other
for the
peaks
rest of my
after
life?
this one? You mean I'll always have to keep working on myself? You mean I don't just get to a spot and then retire? You're like, no, man. Life is just one peak after another, and that's a beautiful, exciting, wonderful thing.
One
It's like,
journey after
yay!
another.
Yeah, it's one journey, one adventure after another. Like, I get to keep going after these cool things for the rest of my life. And some of you are like, I thought I could just retire after this one. Like, can I just like get the kids like through the toddler stage and they take care of themselves
And
now,
then
and I can be done and just watch them go off into the sunset. Like, no. You get to keep going. So,
but it becomes, and I want to encourage people to look for this. It becomes a positive thing. That becomes a good thing.
Yeah.
When you realize that that's how it is, and that's good. And it doesn't mean that every moment's going to be a challenge or a climb or a painful.
We can only hope so.
No. It means there's going to be an ebb and flow. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be strain, stress, and recovery. Yeah. Like it's a cycle. And so you enjoy the cycle. You enjoy the journey. All these, sayings that we've heard, like they're true. You embrace this lifelong journey of growth and development and just love it for what it is.
Yes, I totally agree. It's beautiful. Okay, so a couple more people just joined us. We're talking about influence, and really influence, you'll want to go back and watch the recording. The influence really is built into who you are and how you do what you do. So the question is, and again, I want to hear as much as we can, and you'll see it from different angles and different things you want to have influence in and share that. But what do you need or want to do in order to have more influence in your life and the lives of the people around you? So you want to read Amy's?
Yes. I need to work on communicating my struggles and needs or expectations more, especially if I'm looking for my children to also communicate their struggles and needs. Exactly. Yes, absolutely. Because we're essentially modeling for them how to share with others our struggles and needs. Like, where else are they going to learn that but in our home? It's not going to be picked up. Just like the whole idea of influence is not episodic or automatic. The same is true with something like this. Just because you have struggles and needs doesn't mean you're now going to have the ability to communicate those, because I'm having this struggle, so now I have the ability to communicate it.
Nor does it mean that the people near you will perceive
exactly
what's. So if Rachel's struggling with something, I'm not going to be like, oh babe, I can tell you're struggling with this,
right?
Because you're sitting there thinking I should, right? Or I'm like, can't you tell, babe, how this is hard for me? Can't you tell that this is what I want? And she's like, no, I didn't know that's what you wanted. This has been my life dream. You're like, well, you never told me,
right?
And you didn't ask for help.
Exactly.
Right. There's the influence piece.
So we have to practice doing that. And I would say it is a practice. And you start with small things. In fact, this has been one thing I think I've been doing it for a while, but I've been doing it even more consciously since I heard Jordan Peterson talk about that. And it's this idea that you should never do anything that you resent doing. And so if I'm doing things even around the house and I find myself being resentful, like, oh, well, someone else should be doing this, or why am I doing this? And where is my husband, or where is my kids? I don't do it. And then instead I get centered and I think, do I actually want to do this? If I don't, I ask for help. These dishes need to be done,
huge.
and I really don't want to do them. And maybe I say, why? Because I'm tired, because I'm stressed, because I'm this or that. Will you do them, please? Or I actually realize, you know what? Yeah, I do want to do this because it's a different, I spend a lot of time at my computer. And so when I go do something around the house, it's actually a different type. It's rather than focus thinking, it's diffuse thinking. And so I'm moving my body and I'm doing different things. And so it actually helps me recover from being at the computer for a long time. And so then I'm like, you know what? I do want to go down and load the dishwasher. I do want to go clean up a space because it actually helps me feel better. So then I don't have to be resentful about it because it's something I want to do. So I have to find, yeah.
Oh, well, I want to give a specific for asking someone. This is a perfect example. If Rachel like sits around all the time, doesn't do anything, isn't working on any goals or objectives, she's really just like,
Just
scrolling on
watching
the
Netflix all the
phone,
time.
watching Netflix, just kind of just existing. And then she asks the kids to help her do something she doesn't want to do because she's tired or stressed. I promise the kids will be like,
why don't you do it?
This is bogus. Like, she just sits around a lot. And now she's asking me to do the dishes because she doesn't feel like it. I promise they'll catch on to stuff like that and they'll be like, bull. And so they might do it. And they're going to do it resentfully or whatever. They're going to harbor that resentment for a long time, or they're not going to want to do it and there'll be resistance. But if our kids are seeing Rachel working and contributing and doing all these other things and paying attention and helping them with this and that and this and that, and they're paying attention, they're like, geez, she's doing all kinds of stuff. And she says, hey guys, I'm just tired tonight. Will one of you do the dishes? They're like, of course. Like, you help to do all of this other stuff. Like, I'm all over it. And they do. It happened last night. Parker came right up and I came down this morning. The kitchen looked fantastic. Right?
Because I asked him before I went to bed to do the dishes.
And he's like, man, my mom does tons. Of course I'll do
So
that.
You're right. That's the other key of influence. You have to be living your best life. You have to be your best self. And that doesn't mean being perfect, but it means that people can tell you're trying. People can tell you're striving.
Yeah.
And when you do that and you communicate your needs, because communicating your needs and struggles doesn't give you a free pass to sit on the couch and watch Netflix or do whatever you want. We love to pick on Netflix, but we watch plenty of our own Netflix. It doesn't give you that free pass to just be lazy or just be less capable than you are. You have to be your most capable self, and you have to be improving your own capabilities. And when you do, and you communicate to other people, they want to support you. They want to step in and help you. Because, well, the other piece of that too is like, if I'm feeling resentful about doing something and so I make someone else do it and they feel resentful, that also doesn't work. You have to do it in an influential way, by who you are and the way you communicate, that they want to do it and don't feel resentful doing it.
So let me give another example here with this. So I have a challenge I'm struggling with, or a dream that I'm chasing. I want to and need to communicate that to Rachel and my kids for support.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to effectively do that and earn influence with it and communicate this communication piece really well. Like, hey, I'm struggling with this challenge, or I'm chasing this dream. I'd love your help. And I love what she was saying. That does not give me a free pass. It doesn't say, hey, I need help with this. And what I'm really trying to say is, hey, will you do this? Like, will you take care of that? Because I don't want to. Like, it doesn't work like that. Now, there are things that Rachel does for me that I don't want to do or don't know how to do, and things that I do for her. But that dynamic only works because we're each carrying a load.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If I'm doing something she's not doing and I ask her for help, she's like, yeah, he takes care of this, I'll take care of that. Does this make sense? Like, the communication piece and then the action piece have to go together.
Now, there's another comment here, which is great and perfect. I'm not sure how to communicate my struggles without sounding like I'm complaining. So one of the measures that I always use to make sure I'm seeking for help instead of complaining is this idea we heard a long time ago, and I've just carried it with us. If you talk to someone who can actually help you, you're seeking help. But if you're just telling someone who can't help you, you're complaining. So you could go to the neighbor and talk about all your problems and how stressed you are and all this and that. They are likely not going to help you, so you're just complaining. But if you go to your kids and you say, you know what, guys, this is what I'm feeling. I'm trying to do this, but I also have to get this done. And I think that you could help me out with that. And that would really help me do this other thing that's actually benefiting the whole family. Can you help me? That's not complaining, that's seeking help. So it's based off of whether or not the person you're telling can actually help you solve the struggle.
And if you're looking for a solution or just wanting to tell somebody your problem.
Which, as women, sometimes that's the case.
And
you have, Greg and I have gotten to the point where I can come to him and say, hey, I'm not looking for solutions, Mr. Fix-It. I just want you to listen to me.
And I will zip it.
And that might be your spouse. Maybe that's someone else. Maybe that's your mother or your sister or someone where you're calling them just to get it off your chest, so to say. And you have to learn to recognize that in yourself. Like, am I looking for solutions right now? Do I need to go to someone who can actually fix it? Or am I just trying to get things off my chest and I just need a therapist or someone I can talk to or can just listen to me? And tell people that I just need someone to listen to me right now. Or I just need someone to help me fix this.
Many people, many women have expressed to us that they process things out loud.
Mm-hmm.
So they're processing. Now, again, you pay attention to it because there is a subtle difference. You could be just complaining. You're not processing, nor are you looking for solutions. You're just, I don't like it.
I would say there's another solution that if it's extremely negative and definitely very complaining, me personally, I would probably write it out,
take it on paper,
physically or on the computer, and get it all out that way. If it's very ugly, I don't want to tell anyone that. But you still have to get it out. You don't want to keep it in. So you need to write it out, or, I don't know, drive away in your car and talk to yourself. Those are the things I do when it's extremely negative, extremely ugly thoughts, complaining, feelings, that I'm not seeking for a solution per se, but I'm processing negative emotions.
And you don't want the person on the receiving end to be.
Yeah, especially if that's, even your mother or your sister, like they don't need to receive all that negativity from you. That doesn't help them. So we call that vomiting. You don't want to vomit on people. You want to vomit on paper.
I wish we could somehow see this visually, how it's happening in our society.
People
are going around vomiting on each other. And afterwards, they're like, oh, I feel better. And this person just got vomited on. Now they're carrying that load.
Yeah, so they
go to the next kid and like, I feel like crap today. And it's just spreading around through society. And we're all just dripping in this negativity. And then we turn on the news and get all that vomit. And life's so dark and dreary. I mean, it really feels cruddy.
The reality is that is one of the ways that we maintain more positivity in our life, is that we're very intentional about not being vomited on by news or
anybody,
and not vomiting on each other.
Yep.
And so this is also good to be clear about when you're looking for help with your struggles, your needs, and all of that. You have to be careful that you're not just vomiting on people, complaining about what's wrong. That doesn't help you get the help you need. I would recommend going by yourself, doing a bunch of writing, getting clear about what's wrong, what's bothering you, why it's bothering you, what a potential solution is, and then going and saying, hey, this is what I'm observing. I really think doing this would help. Could you do this to help me? People respond well to that, especially if you are carrying a load.
Yep. And you're striving. They see you moving forward and trying and making efforts. Like, man, I'll help. I will gladly help anyone who's making efforts to rise. I love it. Okay, here's another one here. I love this one, Mary. It says, I want to capitalize on my divine talents. Like, wow, right? That that gives us a massive amount of influence when people notice, and they do notice, and you feel it when you're working on your talents and gifts and abilities.
Especially when you have developed a level of mastery, because, we all have natural talents or inclinations, but in order for those to become fully developed or to capitalize on them, we have to put in the hours.
Yep.
We have to put in the work to reach those levels of mastery. And that is extremely inspiring and influential to other people, because they're like, wow, that takes a price, that, you paid a price to do that.
And that actually has this radiating influence that drives other people to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're neglecting talent or ability, that radiates as well. It's uninspiring. Sometimes, you guys, we lose influence because what we're doing is uninspiring and underwhelming.
Yeah.
With
Even with
spouses, kids,
yeah.
people paying attention. If you're just, I think you can tell, and other people can tell when you're coasting.
Mm-hmm.
And
Just
there's
existing.
only one direction that we can coast, and it's not to the top. So if you ever find yourself,
and it's not to your personal best, which
Right.
means you're meant for the top.
right,
But becoming your personal best doesn't happen by just coasting and just existing. It is effort. It is work.
right, yeah.
Because the opposite of growing your muscles is atrophying your muscles, and it takes work and movement and all of that to move forward. And if you don't do that and you just sit around and do nothing, you get atrophy. Like, that's just the laws of nature. It's just how it works. And it's true in our personal development and in becoming our best selves. We have to be making efforts to get better, or by default, we are just coasting.
Yeah. And I don't think any of us have ever said, hey, wow, look at that person. They're not going anywhere. I want to follow them. Right? It doesn't happen. You don't look at people that are going nowhere in life and be like, that's what I'm aspiring to. I want to go nowhere, just drift slowly down. So again, just do this with the two-sided coin, right? Of accepting and loving yourself as you are, and being what we call divinely discontent, wanting to continue to be better and reach for your potential and your divine talents. And then examine carefully, like, who are you as a person? And is there anything in that that's kind of retarding your influence? And just examine your life. Like, what aspect of my life might be stunting?
Uninspiring.
Yeah, what's uninspiring? What might be stunting my influence? And then what part of communication, overall communication, is stunting or affecting my influence? It might even be like as simple as shabby clothes.
Well, yes. Or for me, I try to pay close attention to how I'm feeling about things going on during the day. Yep. And if I can maintain a sense of calm, meaning I'm not getting irritated by the small things that are going on, that helps me to have more influence. Yep. Because I'm not irritated, and you respond differently. You do. When you have irritation, frustration, annoyance just bubbling under the skin, you respond differently to your children, to your spouse, than when you feel at least just more peaceful.
And that totally affects influence. So in a major way, what she just described, what we've been talking about, literally is an invisible influence. It's happening all the time, whether we're cognizant of it or not, whether we're aware of it or not. Influence is happening all the time. And the quality and quantity of influence we have is in a major way determined by those elements.
Well, and I wanted to add to what you did say about messy clothing, sloppy clothing, because this was actually something that specifically happened in our life. When we started out
You
our
guys,
life.
the
Well,
pictures
you were
from
a
our
teacher.
past are embarrassing.
Our
like
old
really
YouTube
bad.
videos. But we started out where you were a teacher and you actually wore a suit and tie to work
every day. Yep.
So that's how we started. Then we started a traveling lifestyle and we had the freedom to dress however we wanted. And we really did not
and
care.
the limited space to
And
only have
right. And we were traveling. So we
tiny
had
wardrobe.
limited space and a limited wardrobe, and we didn't care how we looked. And I would say that there was a direct connection with when we decided to care more about our appearance and dress ourselves, not to impress, but dress in a way that made us feel better, right? Because we get ready for the day and look nice and neat. Yep. There was a direct connection with the growth of our business, and I would say the influence even in our own house with our own children.
Yeah, inside and out.
They started to notice, oh, Mom and Dad, where are you going? Nowhere. We're just getting ready for the day. This is what we do now, right? And it's influenced them.
Big time.
They love to dress up and look nice, and they've had people comment to them like, "Wow, you guys are always like so dressed up and nice." And that's just how we do things now. It's influenced them, and it's made us more respectable to them and to others because we wanted to not be so sloppy.
Absolutely.
Okay,
so boom, that's it. Love it. We're happy to stick around. Any questions? If you guys have any questions about this or anything else, we can do some Q&A. Otherwise, that's it for today. And that's a powerful lesson and principle, man, that is influencing every aspect of our lives. It really is. Any questions or comments? Anything? If you're just sitting there like you got something really special to say, or really simple to say, or anything to say. If not,
we'll stand here in awkward silence.
Yeah, waiting for the delay, the internet delay. We stand here. I
think all those guys will be in no problem.
I hear.
I heard a voice.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I am trying to discover some of my innate talents. How have you guys discovered yours?
Awesome question.
Great question.
Wow.
For me, it starts with paying attention to the things that interest me. Because I truly believe that interest, in fact, I heard Jordan Peterson put it this way, that you can't force interest. You cannot force yourself to be interested in something. Interest is almost like this fascinating power that just grabs you. And when your interest is caught by something, pay attention to those things, because he put it this way, it's almost like it's a sign or it's a message from your future best self, which this is fascinating coming from Jordan Peterson, because it sounds very metaphysical, and he's not metaphysical, he's a psychologist. It's your future best self. It's your potential, because we all believe in the power of potential. We all know that we have more potential than we are living up to. And so it's your future potential, your future best self, sending you kind of a message of like, hey, this is part of the path that you're supposed to walk. And so by paying attention to what catches my interest, and that could be anything, like literally anything, a car or a book or a song or whatever, and I pay attention to those things and I start to notice them and I start to look for the meaning in them. Like, what is the meaning of this song? Why does it matter to me? Why do I care about that? That's how it starts. And it's kind of a very organic process of just paying attention to those things. And then you just start to, I don't know,
and seeing which ones are kind of fleeting interests and which ones are recurring or stronger. Some of them have a pretty strong, intense emotion with them, or a desire. And I think it's part of, I think it's divine as well. I think that we come from heaven with some imprints of this kind of stuff, interests, desires, whatever. And so paying attention to that and following, for me, it's in combination with interest of trying lots of things, like exposing myself to all kinds of possibilities and experiences. And I'll go out and purposely just try to experience a whole bunch of different things that
To
may not
see-
even pop up on my interest, but I do it and I'm like, wow, I really liked that. In fact, I find myself when I'm there wanting to be really good at it.
Well, because what you're doing in a way is you're trying different things to see what grabs your interest.
Yep.
Because the more things you try, the more options, opportunities, possibilities there are to help you discover what you actually like. I mean, I've talked before about my mango principle, and that was that I didn't know I loved mango or that it was a favorite fruit until I actually lived in a country where mangoes grew and I had them. So you don't know certain things about yourself because you've never been exposed to that part of yourself. So trying lots of different things helps you to discover more about what you're interested in because you're learning more about yourself.
Yeah. So if you guys, all of you wanted to go like really chase this, it would be that very thing of like, go out and
Eat at lots of different
intentionally,
restaurants.
yeah,
Try lots of different activities and go to different places. And like you're experimenting, like, what do I actually like?
I think there are things that you will totally fall in love with and actually be really quite talented in that you have not yet experienced. I really believe that.
Or discovered, yeah.
There's things you haven't discovered that you're going to 100% fall in love with and actually be really good at. You're going to come across things and just lean into it and just like run with it and realize I had never even tried that before.
Idea.
I had no idea. I'm like really good at
Well,
this and I love it.
Here's one example. My whole childhood and teenage years, I like never wrote anything. And if I did, it was a paper for school and I hated it. It wasn't until we started traveling that I started blogging about our travels. And I realized I actually really liked writing and I was pretty good at it, but I had no idea until then. So going out to travel inspired me to write about my traveling, which uncovered one of my talents that I didn't know I had. And now I'm writing a book.
Which she's amazing at, and it's going to influence hundreds of thousands of people through her writing.
My number one fan right here.
Because she's good and I'm not biased. She is
Exactly,
amazing. And yeah, that's a perfect example.
Yeah.
And actually that's been a big part of our business too, because of her writing.
My writing.
So here's Amy said, I'm finding myself very interested in certain things and my husband is not interested at all in these things. He's frequently asking me why I'm interested in them. And although I don't think he means to make me feel bad, sometimes I do start to question if I should be interested.
I would say interest is going to be different for every person.
Yeah.
And just because you're married, I mean, we are interested in vastly different things. You should follow those interests though, because it's part of this process of having influence, because when you develop yourself as a person, you gain respect in other people's eyes. And
so what can naturally happen is she becomes super interested in something. And my first thought is,
why
are you
pointless.
interested in that?
Or this, I think he feels like they are a distraction. Yes, I can feel like that.
Okay.
But it's amazing to me how something that may seem totally unrelated can teach you powerful lessons and principles that apply to other important areas of your life. And I think I found that I'm a very thoughtful person in that I think a lot about things, right? I think deeply about things. And I'm always asking like these existential questions, like, what is the meaning of life for orange juice or something? Like, how does orange juice bring meaning to life or something? Like I pick these random things that I'm looking for how they provide meaning to my life. And so for me, if I'm interested in something, I may not know right away why I'm interested in it or how it has any place in my life or how it's going to add value to my life, but I have learned to trust that interest. And in doing so, I generally find that somehow it connects in. Somehow it brings value. It teaches me something. It at least starts me on a path that leads me to something else that then provides significant value to my life. Like the writing thing, you know, I started doing it because I was interested in it. And then later that became influential and critical part of our business. So we have the business we do now because I started blogging, even though at the time, you know, Greg may have easily said, yeah, this is kind of a distraction. Like we're trying to travel and we're trying to educate our kids and we're trying to, you know, do all these other things. This blogging is, and there was that times we felt that like, man, is it actually worth it? This is just like this hobby that doesn't do anything. But over time, it developed the skill that now is foundational in our business.
And
so
will be your writing empire.
Right. Like we don't know where it's going to lead into the future, but it all started because I followed that interest and that passion, even though at the time it seemed distracting or unrelevant or
Here's awesome. I love that. Here's another thought, perhaps. If I started getting interested in some hobby and I started neglecting Rachel, or I started neglecting my work, she's noticing like, hey, you're not working as much, and I'm noticing the income drop, or I'm not spending as much time with the kids, I'm not as present or engaged. I'm like, yeah, but I'm really interested in this. Then it could start to take a toll, and I lose influence with her in pursuing my interests, because she's like, hey, I'm not so sure about your interest, buddy, because you're neglecting the other areas of your life. So again, circling back to the whole idea of influence, if I'm staying on top of my things, I'm doing my stuff, I'm being healthy and fit and keeping my stuff clean and taking care of my responsibilities, and I have interests, she's gonna be like, chase them.
Yeah.
Go, brother.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. I think they go hand in hand. You pursue the interest, but not at the neglect of the things that are important.
Right.
Right. That's a very important point, because that is when people become resentful. Like, what are you doing? I'm following my interests and passions and you're neglecting everything else.
Right.
It becomes destructive at that point.
The man brain, again, every strength has its inherent weakness. The man brain is very achievement oriented. Get things done. Let's go. And so if he looks over and you're just sitting around enjoying reading about wonderful things, I'm like, yeah, but what are you getting done?
Yes.
Like,
exactly.
Come on. So there's that, again, the two-sided coin, right? There's two sides of it. And again, if I see her just nailing the things that are important to her and us and still pursuing her passion, fantastic. I'm gonna celebrate, I'm gonna cheer, I'm gonna support. But if it's like, babe, you never get ready anymore, you never work out,
well, and here she's adding more, right? If I'm not getting dinner on the table when that's the expectations, then it might look like a distraction, but it's really another example of misalignment
of expectations. Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Because then you roll in and be like, okay, let's communicate about dinner on the table, because not my job, right? And you work out this thing of like, hey, okay, maybe sometimes, but if I'm really interested in something,
right,
go feed yourself or do a little intermittent fasting. Right.
Or,
so
I put it on the calendar where I tell my kids and my husband, like, these nights I'm in my office writing my book, or whatever it is. So you're on your own to figure out dinner, or someone else can make dinner or whatever. So it's just communicating that I want to do this. I don't mind making dinner these nights, but this is something I am interested in. I want to develop it. I want to learn more about it. So I'm dedicating this time to it. Here's the expectations.
And it's interesting to me, there's still a lot of old school man thought of like, I expect dinner at this time, woman. Like that needs some updating if that's out there in the world. I hear it sometimes like, seriously? Did you just say that? Like, call Uber Eats, bro, and order some food, man. Like, what are you doing?
And we do most of our meal times together, but they're not super structured. And there's a lot of communication about, here's the schedule today, who can make dinner tonight, that type of thing. Because
and if I want to and don't want to, and when can do it, and like,
right. And this isn't just between us, this is with our teens too, who are capable of making dinner. Like, we know, all of us know it's a family thing. It's not just my job to put the food on the table, because I also have a lot of other jobs I'm doing,
And the rest
and
of
I'm
us
communicating
eat
that.
too. Yeah.
Right.
It's just
And the rest
team.
of you eat and need to learn how to prepare food and all.
Family
everything
is
else.
a team sport, man. It's a team sport. Okay, here's another one. So he said, I think people can also become resentful when they are coasting themselves. Yes. And seeing others pursue their own interests. Oh my goodness, yes. Because it tears us up inside.
Yeah.
There's something divine, I think, and evolutionary designed into us that we are totally discontented and we don't like ourselves when we're living below what we're capable of. So anytime you're living below what you're capable of, it tears you up. And so there's a lot of resentment and frustration, and irritation, procrastination, or self-loathing. There's a whole storm and a mess when we're living below what we're capable of. So coasting, again, I think it's divine and evolutionary that
Well,
we're not supposed to be coasting.
I was going to add, it definitely is, because this is connected to artificial intelligence. When they started trying to make robots that could like walk and, you know, even move in the environment, they realized that it only works if you have an aim. Like there has to be some sort of goal in order for them to operate and function in this world that you're creating them in. And that is exactly true for us as human beings. We literally cannot function unless you have some sort of aim or goal for every day of your life, and on a broader scale for your life in general. Like it's just, that's literally how our brains are designed to work. You have to have a goal, even if that goal is get out of bed and go to the bathroom. You can't move your body at all unless you have some aim you're moving towards. It's super
awesome.
Fascinating, actually.
We're hardwired for it.
Exactly. Okay. So Amy's saying he's not usually like that.
I wasn't suggesting that.
You're talking to any of those husbands out there that might be like that.
Because there's still some of it.
He used to do all the cooking, but now that I'm home, you left corporate job to be home with the kids, I started cooking, and that's why he's now used to it. Yeah, that makes sense. We do that. We do something and it becomes habitual, and then people think, oh, you're going to do this all the time for the rest of eternity, and this is great. And then we change and we're like, actually, no, I want to work on something else. And so, yeah, we kind of have to communicate that. I think it's really hard for my husband to understand how much is happening at home. He just knows I'm not going to work anymore. Sorry if I turn this into a personal couch.
This is what it's for.
This is why we're here. Like literally, this
Yep.
is why we are here.
We love this.
So
because it's relevant to so many of us. And that's a true thing. Like if I go away to work, Rachel doesn't really know what I'm doing.
And vice versa.
And vice versa, right? And I don't know what she's, and so now she's working, and I'm not sure what her work is.
And you're working, and I don't know what your work is.
Like in my mind, I'm like, it's got to be easy. Like you're just taking care of the kids. Like what's the big deal, right? We always think the other position has got to be simple and easy.
Yeah.
And then you get over, you're like, this is so complicated. You don't know, right? And so it's just, again, it's all that communication, just really opening communication all the way around for all of us. This is true for all of us, and it really changes things and changes influence. Okay, we got to wrap up. I have another coaching
yes.
right now.
Yes, you do. Okay,
so
great.
It was awesome.
Thank you.
Love you guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being amazing people. Influence is everything. Reach upward.